In chapter 32 of the book of Genesis, the Bible records an occasion in which Jacob fought with God at the ford of Jabbok. But many people have difficulty understanding what was the purpose of Jacob's fight with God. Even some people were in doubt whether Jacob really fought with God, or if he simply supported with the angel, or if Jacob's struggle should be interpreted literally, or just symbolically. But in this video, we will analyze in the light of the Bible what the meaning of Jacob having fought with God. But before continuing with the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a video and leave your like. It's very important for the channel, so let's go. In Genesis 32 it talks about the episode in which Jacob crossed the ford of Jabbok with his family. He had left the house of his father-in-law Laban and was going to meet Esau. His brother Jacob had not had any more contact with Esau since he had received the blessing of the firstborn in his place after he deceived Isaac and received the blessing in Esau's place, and Jacob fled to escape his brother's wrath and ended up staying in the region of Paddan working for his uncle and father of his wives and Rachel. Then after several years Jacob decided to leave Panara and return back to Canaan, and it was on this path of reunion that significantly happened. Jacob's struggle with God. Jacob crossed his family through a shallow place on the Jabbok River and then remained there alone. Well, basically the biblical text says that Jacob broke up with the man who appeared there. This fight lasted until dawn. The man wanted to leave, but Jacob didn't want to let him go. But when the man saw that he couldn't dominate Jacob, he touched the joint of his thigh. That is, he injured Jacob in the joint of his leg at the thigh, and as a result Jacob had his thigh dislocated while fighting with that man. When the man insisted on leaving because the day was already breaking, Jacob told him, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Then the man told Jacob what his name was, and after Jacob's answer he changed Jacob's name to Israel. Oh, and here a question inevitably arises. Who was Jacob's opponent in the fight? Was it an angel or was it God himself? He is good. The truth is that the writer of Genesis simply says that Jacob dealt with a man, but it is clear that this man was very special. He was someone capable of blessing and changing Jacob's name. Then there are two main interpretations about this episode. One interpretation says that Jacob lost with an angel sent by God. This means that that man was an angel who in an extraordinary way appeared to Jacob in corporeal form, since the Bible speaks of angels as incorporeal beings. But this interpretation does not harmonize well with the biblical text, nor does it explain the meaning of the name Israel. This then leads us to another interpretation that says that Jacob fought with God, and this interpretation harmonizes better with the biblical text because the identity of the mysterious man who fought with Jacob is implicitly revealed in the blessing he received. This is because when Jacob had his name changed, he heard the following words: "Your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince you have struggled with God and with men and have since prevailed." In Genesis chapter 30 to verse 29, Jacob asked the man's name, but he simply answered, "Why do you ask for my name?" And then the biblical text states that Jacob was blessed there, and then Jacob himself called that place Peniel and explained, "Why I saw God face to face and my life was saved at that point. Since I had no doubt about what had happened in that place, he had no uncertainty as to the identity of the man who had fought with him and the blessed." Well, a long time later the prophet Hosea also spoke about when Jacob fought with God in a prophecy directed to Israel. In this sense he said, "In the womb he took hold of his brother's heel. In the strength of his age he fought with God. He fought with the angel and prevailed. He cried, he asked his favor in Bethel, found God. And there God spoke to us, yes, the Lord, the God of hosts. The Lord is his name." Therefore the angel who fought with Jacob was the angel of the Lord. That is, he was the pre-incarnate God himself. This means that in that episode, hearing what in theology is called Theophany, which means a visible manifestation of God himself in the times of the Old Testament, is. But given this biblical truth, we must understand Jacob's struggle with God in a symbolic or literal way. Well, a lot of speculation has already been done about the nature of Jacob's fight with God at the ford of Jabbok. Some scholars suggest that the fight was not literal but symbolic. Supposedly Jacob would have fought all night in clamor and prayer. But the problem is that there is no symbolic characteristic in the biblical text that records this episode. The description of Jacob's fight with God is inserted in the text that describes a historical event, and that is why many scholars of the Old Testament believe that the best interpretation of the biblical text at this point, certainly the one that states that Jacob actually physically fought with God, This means that on an extraordinary and decisive occasion within the history of redemption at the ford of Jabbok, God manifested himself in a visible and tangible way and fought with Jacob and blessed him. Therefore, we can surely understand that Jacob's struggle with God had a really deep meaning. Even the Hebrew text suggests that it was God who started the fight with Jacob. And the only explanation for this is that God, in a pre-incarnate manifestation, adjusted his strength to Jacob's strength and fought with him, and this explains why already with prevalence in the fight. And in truth, the biblical writer reports that Jacob prevailed until his thigh was dislocated. At that moment he lost the balance point of his strength and lost his stability. And from there, every step of Jacob would be a reminder of his dependence on divine grace, and this is in accordance with the fact that when God asked me his name, he promptly replied, "My name is Jacob." This time, he did not try to be a deceiver as he had done with his father. When he said he was Esau before the angel of the Lord, Jacob recognized that he was a deceiver and confessed his sin. It was there that Jacob truly had an encounter with God. He didn't just have his name changed, but his life was transformed when he fought with God. Jacob did not prevail by his strength, by his ability, or by any of his abilities. Jacob fought with God and prevailed by his weakness, by his sincerity, by his contrition, by his brokenness, and by his humility. And from then on he stopped being Jacob and became Israel, the progenitor of the tribes that formed the nation through which God himself. If you liked this message, share it with as many people as possible. Let's spread the word of God together. That God bless you. I'll wait for you in the next video. A big hug.